I wanted to make a video on tips and tricks for learning effectively because I view this as truly one of the fundamental foundations of being able to do anything at all. So if you think about all the things that you want to do in life, it could be personal, professional, career, anything. If you think of learning as the foundation of that, you need to be able to learn effectively to accomplish anything you want to do. This may seem super obvious, like something that you would learn in school, but actually in my experience, I found that in school, I was never really instructed on how to learn things effectively. It was kind of just a knowledge dump and you just picked up what you could, but I never really got instruction on how to use your mind the most effectively to actually absorb information or to pursue new skills or learn new things. So the first thing I want to cover is motivation. And this really is key to being able to learn anything. You have to have personal buy-in in order to actually be good at something. You can go and learn, something needed for a class or for a career or anything, and you can be decent at it, but you're not going to become truly great until you get personal buy-in to actually pursue that aggressively. You need to have some sort of drive or purpose for learning. This could be just personal fulfillment, or it could be making money, or it could be any other goal that you have, but you need to create a goal and actually get buy-in on that goal for yourself personally in order to really excel at something. This can be somewhat manufactured. If there's a goal that you have that you don't really feel passionate about, you can find ways to tie it back to things that are more motivating to yourself to give yourself that inspiration to continue with it. There's usually some reason for wanting to do something, and if you can refine that reason into something that's truly meaningful for you, you can usually generate the motivation required to accomplish the task. Once you're motivated and ready to truly dive into something, you need to prioritize that. And I know for a lot of people it's hard. They say, I don't have time for this, or I just have so many other things going on. If you truly value learning something, or if it's truly important, say for a career or making money, you need to prioritize learning that topic. And prioritizing means that you need to set out blocks of time where you can focus on that subject without being interrupted. You need to remove the barriers to learning. Barriers can be simple little things that just somehow hinder you accomplishing that task. For me, for instance, when I was learning guitar, I would put the guitar away in the closet. And even that little barrier of having to go and take it out of the closet, which might be 30 seconds or a minute, was enough to be discouraging to me, and it prevented that from becoming a normal habit that I pursued. You need to cultivate an environment where it's easy for you to pursue the activity that you want to do. So that could be, if you're learning an instrument, just leaving it out and having it somewhere accessible where it's inspiring and easy to reach. Removing barriers allows you to be consistent in your learning, which is critical to creating and maintaining a habit and just effectively learning whatever subject it is. Once you have your barriers out of the way and you're prioritizing learning, you need to be able to leverage focus. So part of removing barriers is removing distractions. You need to have focus on what you're doing. You can only really focus for about 20 minutes to half an hour at a time. You need to take breaks and only focus for as long as your brain is capable of staying focused on one task. This isn't a matter of comfort or just getting tired after time. It's actually how your brain learns. You need time for your brain to absorb what you've just been focusing on in order to go on to the next step of learning and build upon that knowledge. When you're learning, you're actually building new neural network pathways to store and access information. That takes time to develop, and it can't be done in one sitting. This is why cramming for an exam the night before is very bad for long-term learning and retention. Effective neural network construction is done with short bursts of intense focus. You need to be able to focus for a period of time and then come back to it later to reinforce the building that was done in the first session. This is where sleeping on something really is effective. Your mind needs time to solidify what it focused on for the prior practice session before you can build upon that with more information. This is actually one of the shortcomings with how education is set up today, where oftentimes in college or university, you're going to have very long periods of one topic for, say, an hour or two at a time, only a couple times a week, when in reality it would probably be a lot more effective to have shorter sessions of more intense focus on each topic. You need to be deliberate with your practice, and a lot of times people go into things without any real plan for what they're going to learn, but you need to have some sort of plan in mind in order to learn effectively. This could just be a broad goal for what you hope to achieve long term, but you need to have some understanding of what it is that you're trying to learn and a way to measure your progress towards that goal. For each each practice or study session, you should have goals outlined for what you hope to achieve or practice in that session. It doesn't necessarily need to be mastering the concept for that session, but you need to have some goals that you hope to focus on during that session. Think of not having a plan as like practicing soccer with your friends after work a couple times a week. Without actual goals in mind or things that you're focusing on in the practice session, it's kind of just aimless play, which can be effective learning in itself, but it's not going to be nearly as effective as actually having a regimented practice schedule where you're focusing on improving certain skills. Each time you're practicing or learning something, don't spend too much time reviewing what you already know. That is important, and we'll get to that, but you want to focus mostly on what you don't really know or you aren't quite sure of. You want to constantly be expanding the boundary of what you know and just being on the edge of your understanding. The goal of this is to strengthen the weakest links. You want to constantly be focused on the boundary of your ability. In sports, for instance, this could be practicing with people that are just a little bit better than you, so you're constantly on the edge of your ability and being stretched to grow. Think about whatever aspect it is of what you're trying to learn that you're uncomfortable with or unsure of, and focus on learning that. So it could be conjugations for language, vocabulary. It could be learning a song on an instrument that's just a little bit outside your comfort zone to push you to learn whatever new techniques are needed to play that song. This will help you identify the gaps in knowledge that you have in areas where you can improve. For whatever skill it is, break it down into its smallest components. For an instrument, this could even involve just playing a single string on guitar for a while, for instance, just so your brain is able to make that connection and build a neural network for playing that one string. You want to have a solid foundation that you're building on before you go into more advanced material. This is something that kids are actually generally very good at through play. They'll break things down into very simple pieces and focus just on those things, whereas adults are more prone to doing something like taking out a library of books and reading all of them before they even start something. This is why doing drills and very simple tasks is very effective for things like sports or music. Things like scales or just dribbling a ball in a sport, focusing on those small tasks to build a strong foundation helps you with your learning later on if you have that foundation to work from. You need to create a feedback loop. So this is something that's really stuck out to me, is creating feedback loops for activities is extremely effective. You need to have a way of seeing or identifying where you've gone wrong. One of these ways could be learning to recognize for yourself when you're making mistakes and being able to self-correct. For some things that may be a little bit more difficult, say for posture for exercise, playing an instrument, or speaking a language, where it can be effective to have a coach that can recognize those things for you and sort of nudge you in the right direction. The feedback loop goes back to having a plan for what you're focusing on. You can identify the areas of weakness using your feedback loop and put those back into your plan so that you can have a better plan going forward to cover all the areas of weakness that you might have. You may have also heard about the concept of active recall. With any sort of learning, you're going to have memory degradation over time. So the longer the span of time between your last practice and now, the weaker that memory is going to be. Active recall forces you to regularly recall what you've learned so that you're constantly refreshing your memory and strengthening in your mind that connection and that knowledge. This usually involves spaced repetition at regular intervals, and there are apps out there that can really help out with this that a lot of people use for things like medical school. Long-term retention requires repetition over time. It's almost impossible to read something once and remember that long-term. And wherever possible, create immersion or have some sort of knowledge framework that you're building off of. So for language, a lot of times you might hear that it's recommended that you immerse yourself in the language, or there are immersive language schools where you go and you're only allowed to speak that language or engage with that language. That's for this idea of immersion, where you're going to be surrounded by what you're trying to learn at all times. For music, it could be listening to whatever music it is that you want to learn to play so that your mind is constantly exposed to what you are trying to achieve. For performing, this could be just getting yourself out there and exposing yourself more to audiences. So you have to get used to or get comfortable with speaking in front of other people. Once you learn more or get more exposure and experience to a topic, your mind starts to build a framework for that topic. and the framework allows you to build much more effectively off of it. This is similar to putting together a jigsaw puzzle, where over time you're going to have more areas to attach things to, and you're going to see the bigger picture more clearly, which is going to more effectively allow you to build out the puzzle picture. Or it could also be like creating an organized file cabinet in your mind, where over time you build out files and you have clearer areas for organizing that information. Your brain functions in the same way. It needs something to attach knowledge to. Once you start to build a framework, it's much easier to build off of that framework. In the description below, I'm going to have some links to books that are really great about effective ways of learning and how you can apply this in your own life.